Today I'm really especially honored to have the privilege to introduce James Dallas, who I can truly say is one of my all-time favorite executives. I've got a chance to work with James and know him over the years, and his wisdom, his insights, and just the person he is, I think makes you very special. So I want to just acknowledge that. I just can't say enough good about you, and I think you've been very important for Medtronic. And James is kind of a rare person in many ways. He's got pretty much an operations background, I'd say. He spent 22 years at Georgia Pacific before he came here, so he had a very full career there. And I think it was 2006, I got the date right, that you came to Medtronic, so it's about 7 years ago. James came here, and his focus at that time was information technology, and he was our CIO. I got that right? CIO, yes. But after he was here a couple of years, it became clear that his interest and his talents were well beyond that. And James took an interest in quality, and I think that's where we really got to know each other, because that's my passion too. And we worked together, and James was the one that really emphasized and said, you guys spend a lot of time fixing problems. Why don't we prevent problems? That was one of your insights and one of the inspirations. And it's really changed a lot of how we do things around here, because it is more important, far more important, to prevent problems than to fix them after they come up. The trick is, how do you do that? How do you recognize them? And therein lies the rub why it's difficult to do this. But that's maybe part of what James is going to talk to us today about. But I think most of you know, or all of you know, that he's retiring, I think, this month, right? This is last month here, and he's going to move down to Atlanta, where it's a bit warmer, so he wanted to make sure he got out in August before the first snow fell. So can't blame you for that. But before he went, I was really intent on having James share some reflections, some insights, words of wisdom that I think give us something to think about. Much like Steve Molly was here a week or so ago and talked about reflections on his career, what he thought was important about leadership. I wanted to make sure that we heard from James too before he departed, because I think he has a lot to say that we should be thinking about. And I think without much more ado, I think just to turn the stage over to James. Afterwards, we're going to have a Q&A session, so a chance to interact, ask some questions, get some clarifications, whatever is on your mind. So thanks, James.
Okay. Well, thank you, Darryl.
Yeah.
Thank you for the warm, real warm. I want to thank Darryl for the warm introduction. I want to thank all of you for how you welcomed me into the family. When I came 7 years ago to Medtronic from the South, and again, we were like the Beverly Hillbillies, okay? But we didn't go all the way west. We stopped in the Midwest, and you all welcomed me. And that was special. You welcomed me knowing that not only did I talk with a little different accent, I used a lot of sayings that when I was presenting, people would turn around and say, "What did he just say?" Because I use analogies like that dog don't hunt and stuff, down south. And then up here, y'all will just say, that's interesting. And then turn to the person and say, what did he just say? Okay? But you welcome me. And that's what makes Medtronic special. I'm going to talk about two things today. Some of my leadership principles, and also what makes Medtronic special. Now, my leadership principles, everyone is a leader. And being a leader means that you have to have a teachable point of view. Meaning, what are your core beliefs about leadership? And then that teachable point of view has to be based on some type of foundation. Now, before I talk about my leadership principles, teachable point of view, I want to give you all a feel for what's the basis of them. The basis is this. I'm an ordinary man who's living an extraordinary life. Yeah. Those of you all who have worked with me know I am ordinary. But for some reason, I'm living an extraordinary life. And those three, the reasons, are the basis of my principles, leadership principles, 3 of them. The first one, be visible. As a leader, you have to be visible. That means you've got to get out to where the people are. You have to. If you spend all your time in conference rooms, in meetings, looking at PowerPoints, instead of out meeting with what I call the power people. Give me the power people, not the PowerPoint. That was my motto, okay? Because whenever I went in a meeting and there was a 100-page PowerPoint presentation, I'm like, isn't there something in the Constitution about cruel and unusual punishment? I mean, sitting through that, I want to hear from the people. Because when you're in meetings, people talk to the presentation. And then you ask questions about that slide on the presentation. But when you're out with people, whether it's walking the halls, whether it's out in with the salespeople, in the distribution centers, in the manufacturing, with the quality organization, you learn really what's going on. See, the higher you go up in an organization, the more people talk about you than to you. Think about it. You talk more about your boss than to him or her. So the only way they're going to find out what is actually going on is to get out there, interact with them. I found out more of what was going on when I would just walk the halls, stop people on the elevator or going into the restroom. Oh, you catch somebody going into the restroom, they will tell you everything. Everything. Catching them coming out is a different story, but going in, I learned so much. So you got to get out, and you have to interact with people. You have to engage them. That's how you get to know them, and they get to know you. You know, when you're presenting, people only listen to 7% of what you say. The rest is how you say it. So then it becomes the only way they're going to know the how is to know you. So as a leader, get out, get to know the people so that they can then get a chance to get to know you. So being visible is number 1. The second one, being inquisitive. Always asking the question, how can we make this better? That's been the driver of my life, how to make something better. Notice that's the question, being inquisitive. So that means if you don't ask that question, you're thinking you have all the answers. You have to get out and ask people that. How can we make things better? How can we serve the customer better? How can we make the products better? How can we engage our people better? So being inquisitive. And you know what? One of the tremendous byproducts of being inquisitive, nothing engages people more than when you ask them of their opinion. Yeah. You engage them. People will support you if you ask them their opinion, even if you make a decision counter to that. But if you take the time to ask them their opinion. There are 2 things that people value more than anything else: security and significance. They want to be doing things that they not only feel are important, but also that other people feel are important. They don't look for pats on the back all the time, but they do want you to recognize who they are, what they do. So engaging people and being inquisitive. Now, in order to be inquisitive, you got to get comfortable with not being with not being the smartest person in the room. Yeah. So that means you're going to listen more. In fact, I've done my best leadership jobs when I've known the least, because I listened the most. Some of my worst leadership jobs is when I knew it looked like a duck, it quacked like a duck, it must be a duck. And I didn't ask any questions, and I charged full speed ahead, and I was wrong. But my best leadership had been when I knew the least, and that meant I asked the most questions and engaged people more. So you got to get comfortable with being not the smartest person in the room. You also have to get comfortable with getting lost with confidence. Yeah. Because when you're inquisitive, that means you're going to go down a road that has not been traveled. So the odds are there are not going to be any landmarks or road marks that you can, that you can't MapQuest it. Okay? You can't Google it. You've got to chart the path. So you got to get comfortable with getting lost with confidence. Now, what do I mean with that? You know what you're setting out to do. You just don't know really how to get it done yet. So regardless of how much you may study it in a conference room or whatever else, the only way you're going to really find out is to go out there and start trying it. And when you run into something you did not expect, do you let that take all the air out of your balloon? Or do you say, here's something we've learned, now let's apply that learning. But we're going to keep moving forward. We just may move in a different direction, but we're going to keep on with our goal. But you have to get comfortable and confident with getting lost. And you also have to get confident and comfortable with being wrong. My goal was right, but the way I went about it was wrong. Now, being inquisitive. I've been inquisitive since I was born. And since I was born nearsighted, I was even more inquisitive because I couldn't see what everybody else could see. So I asked questions. And my life changed one day when I was in the 3rd grade, and my mother took my oldest brother and me into a music store. He picked out a guitar, and I picked out a violin. Why did I pick out a violin? I don't know. It looked good. Okay, plus, being the middle child, you always want something unique. I didn't even get my own set of pants until I was like 20. Okay, because all my pants were handed down from my brother. Those of y'all who are middle child know what I'm talking about in here, okay? Those who are older, well, you got the new stuff, and the baby got the new stuff in the middle. So you're always looking for something that's going to set you apart, and it was that violin. And man, did it change my life. Because we were raised in the inner city. So I took to that violin, learning, and I was fortunate enough to get good enough with it while I was in the orchestra for the kids of that age. So all of a sudden I got exposed to different people, different things that I never would have if I did not play that violin. Man, it changed my life. Now, I had to put up with some sneers and some criticism. To be in the inner city walking around with a violin ain't cool, I can tell you that, okay? And I wasn't tall then, and I wasn't strapped, okay? So I had to put up with violin. Who plays the violin? Okay? So I had to put, and you're going to this and an opera? Who do you think you are? But it gave me exposure. I got to meet different people. I got to see different things. I remember one of the things we went and saw Camelot. I don't know, I'm dating myself, but all of us went to see Camelot, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. But it changed my life. It got me comfortable with being with people who did not look like I did not live in the same place that I did, but we shared a common goal in the music. And when you bring it together, nothing is more powerful than an orchestra that's operating on all cylinders. And I was actually the first violinist. How many of y'all know about violins and orchestras? Yeah, the first violinist meant that I was pretty good. Now, let me just give you a caveat. The older you get, the better you were when you were growing up. Okay? 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 Yeah, that's some revisionist history, okay, that takes place. So, being inquisitive, getting comfortable with getting lost, getting comfortable with being wrong. Okay? Now, how do you lower the probability or the percentages of being wrong or getting lost? And that's the third principle, being inclusive. Get comfortable with having a team around you of people who think and look at things differently than you do. One of the things that I learned from Daryl and from Richard with the critical thinking course they teach is that data is objective, but how it's interpreted is totally subjective. We all have built-in biases in how we interpret data. So unless you surround yourself with people who are going to look at it differently than you do, you're not going to come out with the best solutions. Because regardless of how hard you try, we all have built-in biases in how we look at data. Let me give you an example. Luann Pindy and I, with Shamada-san, we went to visit Toyota when they started having all of those quality issues. You remember when they had it was like one recall after another, management was pointing at ownership, it was just ugly. We went over there and we met with people like 2 levels down because we wanted to get the real deal on what happened. How can a company go from epitomizing quality to all of a sudden be the worst at it? What happened? And what we heard from them, it was amazingly obvious, but powerful. One of the things they said, those cars were getting more and more complicated. They now have more software in them than metal. However, they did not change their development methodologies to deal with the complexity. That's why DRM, when you think about how our products are getting more and more complex, as we make them more minimally invasive, as we incorporate more software and technology, disease management into them, as we do more combination devices, they're getting more complicated. So we can't continue using the same methodologies when the end product is getting more complicated. So that was one thing. The other thing they mentioned, and this was what had the biggest impact, they used to do reviews in which if I were the product manager, they gave me that project, I would pick out experts within the company, be it polymers or whatever, that went into that product, to be my review group. It was kind of like the senseis. I think that's the right term. It's like the highest level. And it was an honor to be recognized as a sensei. They had a website that had all the senseis out there in their background, so the project leader could point them or could select them. And then they would do the reviews. Well, they stopped doing that because they said a couple of things. It was taking too much time. Okay, everything's fast. And then the second one, they said, well, they weren't finding that much. Well, what they failed to realize, what they came to realize in retrospect, and those of you all who are out there who are project managers can relate to this, in preparing for a review, you take a step back and try to think about what questions the reviewer is going to ask you. So by not taking that step back, they were still looking at things the same way. So they incorporated that. They had a saying for that. It was kind of like finding the unknown. But that's what that group was doing. Back to data is objective, but how it's interpreted is subjective. A lot of the quality issues we've had, the data didn't change about them. A lot of them. but it was how the interpretation did, either on the part of the FDA or of someone else. And as more and more data becomes publicly accessible, it's going to be more and more important of us of having people of different backgrounds take a look at things, not only in the product development process, but also anytime there's a quality issue, a field corrective action, or we see any type of activity taking place with a product out there, be it an MDR. Is it? Yeah, I'm right. Sometimes I get MDR and master data management. That's when the IT hat is on master data management, the quality one is on MDR. But being inclusive, the same thing as we become more and more global and we target more markets, you have to have more people taking a look, participating in the strategies, who are going to look at things and developing them from different perspectives. So, being visible, being inquisitive, and being inclusive. Now I'm going to stop right there, because I'm a big believer people can only listen to you for so long. Okay? Stop, see if there are any questions, and then I'm going to transition into what makes Medtronic so special. So, while you all are thinking of questions, if there aren't any, before I get into what makes Medtronic so special, let me talk to you about the two biggest mistakes I see leaders make and that I've made myself. The first one, going too fast between the what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Whenever you go too fast between the two, you run the risk of messing it up. The how is always more critical than the what. I'm not taking anything away, but I can get 10 smart people, give them the same set of facts with a situation, and 8 of them will come up with similar strategies. But only 2 will be able to execute them. That's the how. So between the what and the how. And that's what is between the what and the how? This big word called culture. How do you factor in an organization's culture into how you need to execute on an initiative? And a lot of times culture gets overlooked. But culture is critical. And every plant, every company has a culture. All of them aren't functional, but you have to factor in the culture. Now, you don't let that prevent you from doing what you need to do, but you think about how you need to do it to work within the culture or aspects of the culture you need to address in a proactive way in order to make it happen. But going too fast between the what and the how. The second mistake the leaders make, going back to culture. Every culture has a set of norms or behaviors. Whenever somebody violates one of those norms, when a leader does not address it quickly and directly, it can just mess up an organization and a team. Think about it. Every time you all have been on teams in which somebody isn't doing the right thing, or somebody did something the wrong way. When that's not addressed, it can just destroy a team. It can just lead to dysfunction. So not addressing behaviors that are not acceptable within the culture. Now, notice, I'm not saying that everybody needs to act the same, but there are core sets of behaviors. Like within Medtronic, okay, one of our core behaviors, we like straight talk. If something is wrong, tell us it's wrong. We also have a sense of fairness. Okay? We have a sense of community. When somebody's doing things in an underhanded manner or whatever else, and the leader doesn't address it, that can just mess up the whole team. So, going too quickly between the what and the how, and not addressing behaviors that are inconsistent, diametrically opposites, okay, of the culture. Questions with that? Yes. Yes.
Hi, thanks so much for speaking with us today. I have a question about at what point in your career you were able to articulate those leadership principles and how have they changed over the course of your leadership?
Excellent. Normally, I came up with those principles when something went wrong. No, seriously. Those are the defining moments. The older you get, the more you have to have something smack you in your nose, where you take a look. That's when you learn. What's the saying? One of the philosophers, the teacher will appear when the student is ready. You're never more ready than when you're flat on your back looking up. Okay? Yeah, I had a situation back to culture. I had a project I had just hit a home run on. I mean, we knocked it out the park. So we said, we're going to go put it in this other business. And again, look like a duck, walk like a duck, quack like one. I went to put it in that other division. It was an utter failure. I didn't, and it wasn't because of the technology. It was because of the way I approached it. I didn't take the time to sit down and listen to the people. I came into their room with the answer. Think about it. If you're working with smart people, they just don't want you to come in with the answer. They want to understand, they want you to hear them out and then understand how did you come up with it. But yeah, so it was a failure, and I was fortunate that people saw what was in my heart as opposed to what was in my head and coming out my mouth. And they gave me another opportunity, another shot at it. So that was one. The one about being visible and engaging people. When I was at Georgia Pacific and I was a programmer trainee, I used to get to work every day, and as I was walking to my cubicle, the director of IT would always walk by me and never speak to me. He would just walk by me every day. And it'd just be the two of us in the hall. And he would never acknowledge my presence. And I jokingly have told people that I was tempted one day to get to the stall next to him and stick my head up and say, "Hey, Bob, James Dallas, programmer, A1." Okay? Yeah. But, you know, fortunately, I kind of pulled back on that one. Okay? But then guess what? That was a bad IT project. Okay? Things started to slip. And Bob had no supporters because no one knew of Bob. And one day I get to work, and Bob pops up in my cubicle, scared the living bejesus out of me. Man, shouldn't you be in the bathroom? Okay? Yeah. Okay? Yeah. But by that time, no one knew of him. See, as a leader, you can get away with people not knowing who you are when things are going good. But everything is not going to always go good. And when things start going south, if people don't know who you are, what your intentions are, how you're engaging them, they're going to turn on you. Not because they don't like you, but because they just don't know you. And then they're going to start filling in the gaps that don't have anything to do with you, but since you haven't given them anything to work with. Okay? But yeah, so I learned, and I made it a point, I wasn't going to be Bob. Okay? I was not going to be Bob. You know, to walk by me every day. I can understand every other day or something like that, because sometimes leaders have something on their mind that, you know, because there are times I could be focused and I need to get there and everything else. But every day, it's like, come on, man. So that's what I learned. The other reason I learned about engaging was when I worked as a janitor at Pepper's Farms. It was the plant that I worked in at college. And the plant manager did our orientation. Yeah, the janitor's orientation. Told us how important our jobs were in keeping the plant clean. Because Pepper's Farm makes the cakes and the breads and the stuffings. How we need to keep it clean, or if an inspection was done, they could shut us down. Well, he made such an impact on me. There was one Sunday I was working, and I saw where a coworker hadn't done his job. The big vats that the dough went in, he just cleaned the outside of them. The inside was filthy. Filthy, and that stuff had set overnight. And the thought of putting fresh dough in those vats just... But my situation was that person had left, had already gone home because he worked the earliest shift. I did not have enough time to do the job I was assigned to and to clean up what he didn't do. So I was left with two options. One, tell the supervisor, and the other to keep my mouth closed. Now, if I would have told the supervisor, plants are just like school. Any of you all who worked in a plant, there's such a sense of community. If I would have told the supervisor, how would everybody at the plant viewed me? All my coworkers. As a snitch. Suck up. Yeah. And if I wouldn't have said anything, then people would have gotten nasty food. No other better way of putting it. So what did I do? I told. What happened to me afterwards? I got the silent treatment. But that was fine with me. Because back then, I was more buff, too. You talking to me? And since some of my fellow teammates also worked at the plant, I know I only got the silent treatment at the plant. I got it at the school and with the team. But I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't have changed a thing. I told that story. I did the commencement address at my undergrad school. I told that story. I did it about 10 years ago. I told that story, and little did I know, Ernie, who was the plant manager, was a trustee at the school and was sitting behind me all robed up. And he did not know he had made that impact on me, but he did. Because see, when it comes to quality, you're going to have moments of truth. And we've had some quality situations because people said they did, but didn't. And when you're dealing with the FDA, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. So that's just the FDA part of it. We're more focused on the quality of the product part, not taking anything from the FDA, but the fact that somebody said they did something and didn't. And we've had situations like that. But fortunately, we've had people say that was wrong. What just took place. What you did was wrong, and we can't have that. So my leadership principles always, and the same with you all, are going to come from defining moments that always are going to be ones that are going to be something went wrong, or you're faced with making a decision that may make you get labeled one way or another. But it's what I call defining moments and lessons that you can only learn by life teaching you. You can go to school, you can listen to other people, but until you go through it, you cannot learn it. So I've always tried to take difficult moments, problems, and use them as teachable moments. And you'd be surprised. Leaders have the ability to springboard off of those teachable moments. They just don't bounce back. They bounce up, and they just take that and they just go with it. Other questions for me? Yes. How are we doing with time? Because I don't want the last memory of me being going over time and everything else. Yep.
Hi, James. My name's Ward Tong, and I work for the Neuromodulation Division. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered, from your perspective, how important is a sense of humor and having fun at the leadership level?
And everyone heard the question. I'm not repeating. Did everyone hear the question? Yeah. That is critical to leadership. I used to be so serious as a leader that I knew I drove people crazy. I was so serious. In fact, I tried to be so perfect as a leader that I actually wound up in the hospital. It wasn't stress. I just worked myself, and that was, about 20 years ago. I just worked myself almost to death trying to be perfect. Okay? And whenever you're perfect, trying to be perfect, you're going to just irritate the heck out of your people. Okay, because you're going to be all up in their business and everything else, and they're like, wait a minute, you gave me this job. If you want to do it, add it to your title. Okay? So having humor. And I'm so fortunate that I like to laugh. and I can laugh at myself. Okay, yeah, I can laugh at myself, and I learned when I was growing up, when you're playing the violin, and as a lot of you all know, because you've heard me before, my head has been the same size since I was 5 years old. Okay, it grew before the rest of my body. Okay, so I got the violin, I got a big head, I'm nearsighted, and in the inner city, people would crack on you. We call it joning. They would just, some people call it the dozens or whatever, but they would crack on you. So unless you had the ability to laugh and not get mad and then crack back at them, life would be miserable. So I learned how to laugh, but then I crack back on them. Oh, yeah. We used to practice those yo mama jokes. Yeah. Those of y'all, some of y'all are saying, what is he talking about? Yeah, in the inner city, yo mama jokes were like, they were taught. And some guys would try to do it impromptu. No, I practiced for them. Oh, yeah. We did not have the internet back then, so I had to go to their house to see how their mama looked. Yeah, so I learned to laugh because get this, if you don't laugh, what's the other alternative? That's right. So you laugh. I laugh. So yeah, it's funny. There's Steve Roofing. He used to support me from an HR standpoint, and Connie, and all the people who, whether it's Michelle, anybody who normally came and met with me, it could be on a serious topic. After we stopped talking about that serious topic, we were going to have something to laugh about. That was going to be something we were going to laugh about. And it's amazing, all of a sudden, you realize that what you thought was just the end of the world isn't. That's another thing to learn. Things are never as bad as you think they are. And they're also never as good as you think they are. Okay, because when you think it's all good, you start believing your own hype. But things are never as bad. Now, they can be rough and tough, but they're never as bad. And there's something about humor. In fact, I was talking to a group today. I have been all around this world, like many of you all. Languages are different. Even people who speak the same language can have different definitions. I've learned that here with metrics. You can have people come in with, some say we got 100% field rate, and it's like, no, that's the way you define it, okay? But the thing that's common throughout this world, facial expressions, correct? A frown is a frown regardless of what language a person speaks. A smile is a smile. A look like, I'm not that sure, is the same. So humor has a way of connecting people that words don't. So yeah, I'm a big believer. Have fun. And I understand that there are some people in IT and other parts of the company. They say I laugh like Yogi Berra because my shoulders go up, so they can imitate me pretty. In fact, I wonder if that person is here. You probably didn't know I know that, okay? Yeah, knew that. Walking around imitating me. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Because I want to be respectful of time. James, please.
James, you are definitely not Bob from IT, I'll say. I'm just wondering, you shared some of your past thoughts on mistakes or failures, but as you reflect back on your career, what are you most proud of?
I am most proud when I see people do things they thought they couldn't. Take, for example, my first day here, definitely my first week, I spent it with customer service. Quarter end here is an event. I spent it, so for 28 quarters in a row, I sat out in customer service. I used to bounce when we had Mounds View as our warehouse. I was bounced between Mounds View, customer service, IT, okay, because all that came together, sales. And I knew we were getting ready to implement SAP. And I knew it was going to be tough. Anytime you implement an ERP system, it is tough. And I knew I've gone through it so much, I knew that it was going to be toughest on our frontline people who are dealing with the people out in sales or the customers, and they're trying to deal with the warehouse, the systems, and everything else. And I knew regardless of how well we trained and how well we prepared, there were going to be problems. And when I saw you all work through that, customer service, warehousing, that gave me such a sense of pride. To see people accomplish more than they thought they could, that just gives me pride. I take tremendous pride in that. So that, and then, well, this is on a personal note. My daughter getting married. She got married, on June the 8th, and walking her down the aisle was so special. And then people always comment on the smile that I have on my face, and they were wondering, was that because, you can stop writing checks now, or what? Okay. No, just to see that. In fact, that leads into why I'm retiring. Some of you all know I was fortunate in that blood clots had gotten in my lungs, and I got to the hospital in time. And then the medication they put me on, Coumadin, I had every side effect. I was in the emergency room 3 times in 18 months. Okay. And then I started thinking about what Earl always asked us to see if we can get doctors to ask patients whenever they get one of our devices, so what are you going to do with the extra time? What are you going to do with the extra time? And I started thinking, I grew up in the inner city. There's nothing special about me, but I've been able to achieve some things. Let me go back to the inner city and get more Jameses to achieve things. You all know what the state is with African American young men, just as a whole. How can we make more of them more successful? So one of the things I'm doing is actually going back and being the assistant coach at my high school. Yeah. And it's so odd the way it worked out. Our high school went to, and it's the same high school that Martin Luther King went to, Booker T. Washington in Atlanta. The high school went to uniforms to kind of reduce some of the peer pressure and everything else, but a lot of the kids couldn't afford them. So my wife and I used to give donations with our class. So I went there just thinking that I was going to give another donation, and the principal said, James, we much prefer your time instead of your money. People come in once or twice a year on career day. Okay, that's good, but we need a more constant presence. So, yeah. Richard.
I want to thank you for opening up or just talking about that, because it allows me to ask a question I've been thinking about. And that is, I know you speak to audience of African Americans as well as other minorities. Is there anything that any messages that you give to those audiences that you wish the white audiences would hear?
Yeah, and that is, regardless of how you think things are, and it's back to being inclusive, reach out. My biggest supporters and sponsors throughout my career have always been white men or white women, because they were in the executive suite. And the only way I could get in the executive suite is if one of them would have opened up the door. Take someone of color or someone of a different sex and be a sponsor of that person. You'll be amazed how much you're going to learn from each other. My best buddies at my previous company are all from South Georgia. And they could have been on Hee Haw if you looked at them. I know I'm dating myself. Some of you all don't even know about Hee Haw and stuff like that. Okay? Just the way they look, because they grew up in that area. But they didn't think anything like if you just judge them based on their appearance. And people could not understand. They couldn't understand, James, how can you and Billy be that close? I mean, you have nothing in common. And it's like, we got a lot in common. And that's back to my point. Focus on what you have in common first, and then get to the differences. If you start out with the differences, you'll never get to what's in common. The other thing, the message I give to a lot of minority audiences, and especially young men, is that, look, I ran into a lot of things that weren't fair. I've been accused of crimes. I've had my own situation, like the one that's been in the news. But in my case, I was profiled by an African-American man. okay, accused of a crime. They didn't believe me and everything else. And what I always tell people is, don't let something that's negative or unfair happen to you change the way you view things. People, if you just keep at it, somebody's going to give you a break when you least expect it. In fact, the last time I was here, there were two young ladies that were eating kind of across from me. And I went up to them. They were African-American young ladies. I went up to them and I said, why are you all so angry all the time? And what they said to me was that, James, if you lived in our neighborhood, if you didn't come across tough, you will be the victim. Well, I told them, look, you got to learn how to turn that off when you're outside of your neighborhood. Because who's going to hire and want to be around somebody that looks mean all the time and mad all the time? So, yes, you got the challenge of learning how to do both. You got to be tough in your neighborhood. I recognize that. And if being tough, it means wearing your pants to your knees in your neighborhood, go for it, okay? Okay? Me being the middle child, I prefer something that fit because I didn't have anything that fit, okay? Because I was wearing my brother's hand-me-downs. But once you get outside of that, look the part. So that's what people are going to master. And then reaching out. I was just fortunate. The people just reached out. And that's back to being visible and engaging. You can't reach out in a conference room over a meeting. Because that meeting, you got a topic in mind that you're focusing in on. You got to get out. When it's not over an issue, unfortunately, the issues can trigger the dialogue. But let it continue after that. And be a sponsor of someone who's different, and it's amazing how much you learn there. I was telling a group of our high school interns today that I've traveled all over the world, and you all know that I have a heavy Southern accent and everything else. But I've learned if you try to say hello and thank you in their native language, people will work with you. If you just make an attempt at that, they will embrace you. So find out what's common, work with what's common. And that's what I used to do a lot when I tried to bring people together. We'll let the 5% difference prevent us from getting the 95% that's common. So I always try to find out, okay, you're disagreeing on this. What are we agreeing on? Is this enough? Sometimes that 5% is critical, but a lot of times it's not. Can we move forward with the 95 and come back to the 5? Well, look, I don't want to overextend my welcome. Thank you all for the support, the warm welcome. Man, I walk down the halls and I just see, you all are the ones that make me smile. You can't help but smile at somebody when they smile at you. The body, unless unless there's something wrong with you, if somebody smiles at you, it's just hard for you not to smile back, okay? So you all make me smile, and you all, it's funny when people was like, James, we didn't understand a word you said during that presentation, but it was good. Well, look, today was good. Thank you all, thank you all, thank you all. What are we doing back?
So here's a small memento to remember for today. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I think there's no doubt everybody really enjoyed this, and I think James gave us a lot to think about and translate to our own personal lives, our professional lives here. And I encourage you to do that. If people were not able to be here or hear it live online, we will have this up and within a short period of time, so you can pull it back up, you can rehear it, you can encourage other people to have them listen to it and look at it. This was an awesome presentation and probably one of the more important talks I've ever heard, so thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.